When Madison Richardson agreed to fill in for a relative at a luxury airport pickup desk, she thought it would be a one-time favor. A few awkward pleasantries, a name on a placard, and a silent car ride. But when she accidentally escorts the wrong Raymond Steele, not just any traveler, but a reclusive tech billionaire, she finds herself swept into a story far bigger than a mistake. What begins as a simple mix-up soon spirals into a quiet romance, a second chance at purpose, and a life neither of them saw coming. Sometimes the wrong pickup leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The morning sun had barely crested the skyline when Madison's phone began to buzz relentlessly on her nightstand. She groaned, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders as she blindly reached out, knocking over her half-finished journal and a coffee-stained paperback. Her fingers finally wrapped around the phone. "Hello," she mumbled, her voice gravelly. "Madison, oh thank God you picked up," came a rushed voice on the other end. It was Andrea, her mother's cousin's daughter. A relative Madison barely spoke to outside of the occasional family wedding or awkward dinner. "Andrea, it's 6:30 in the morning. Is something wrong?" "Yes. I'm sick. Like actually sick. Fever, chills, my whole body is aching. I need a huge favor. Please, can you cover my shift this morning? Just for a few hours." Madison rubbed her forehead, still not fully awake. "What shift?" "My job, the VIP pickup concierge service. Today's client is important, super low maintenance, and it pays $200 cash. All you have to do is hold a sign, greet him, walk him to his car, and help him check into the hotel." Madison blinked at the ceiling. "You want me to pick up some random rich guy from the airport? He's not random, he's Raymond Steele. And you won't be alone. The driver's already arranged. You just meet him, guide him, and that's it. Andrea, I don't even work in hospitality. You're polite, you're smart, and I'm desperate. Please. It's one pickup. The driver knows the rest. I'll text you all the info. Please, Madison. I can't lose this job." Madison sat up, pinching the bridge of her nose. Her bank account was dangerously low. Rent was due in a week. Her barista shifts barely covered groceries, and her writing gigs had dried up lately. This was easy money. And a fancy client, no less. Maybe it'd be worth a short story. "Fine," she sighed. "What do I wear?" "Something smart. Black pants, white shirt. Oh, and carry a clipboard. Makes you look official." By 7:20 a.m., Madison was speeding down the freeway in a rideshare, smoothing out the creases in her borrowed blouse. She clutched the name placard in her lap, Mr. Raymond Steele printed in bold black letters, and quickly scanned the client sheet Andrea had emailed her. It was sparse. Flight number, ETA, 8:05 a.m., arrival gate C7. No photo. No assistant listed. Just the name and a note. High profile. Handled discreetly. Fantastic, she thought. Exactly the kind of vague that made her stomach churn. By 7:50 a.m., she stood in the international arrivals terminal, among a sea of signs and sleepy drivers. She adjusted her posture, lifted the placard, and waited. Every few seconds, her eyes darted to the glass doors as passengers trickled out. Businessmen with earbuds, families wrangling suitcases, elderly couples holding hands. Then, at exactly 8:12 a.m., a man in a navy blue suit exited the terminal alone, pulling a sleek charcoal carry-on. He moved with quiet confidence, not rushed, not searching. His eyes swept over the crowd and locked onto her sign. He paused, tilted his head slightly, then made his way toward her. Madison straightened, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Mr. Steele?" He gave her a small smile. "Yes. You must be with the concierge." "Yes, I'm Madison. I'll be assisting you today." "Pleasure," he said simply. His voice was low, even-toned, almost amused. He didn't offer a handshake, but gave her a courteous nod. "I'll take that," she said, reaching for his suitcase. He raised a brow but let her. Thank you. They walked through the parking structure in silence for a moment. Madison's heart pounded. He was taller than she expected. Clean-shaven, late 30s perhaps, and impeccably dressed. His shoes were spotless. His posture perfect. He didn't look like someone who needed help finding a hotel. I hope your flight was comfortable, she said, trying to keep her tone professional. It was fine. Singapore is a long haul. Oh yes, that's where you flew in from. She cursed herself. Of course it was. It was literally on the form. He glanced sideways at her, his expression unreadable. You're new to this job. It wasn't a question. Madison hesitated, then gave a sheepish smile. Very. He let out a short chuckle, the first break in his otherwise composed demeanor. I suspected. She laughed awkwardly. That obvious? Only slightly. But you're doing fine. She relaxed a little. As they approached the waiting black sedan, the driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Madison gestured for the man to enter, then slid in beside him after placing the suitcase in the trunk. The car hummed quietly as it pulled away from the curb. Madison glanced at the rearview mirror. The driver, an older gentleman named Anil, gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. I've arranged check-in at the Marriott downtown, Madison said, glancing at the tablet Andrea had provided. We'll get you there in about 35 minutes. Sounds perfect, he said. I appreciate the help. He leaned back and closed his eyes, and for a few minutes, they rode in silence. Madison let herself exhale, hoping the rest of this task would pass without complication. She had no idea that in her lap was the start of something that would upend the careful monotony of her life. She had no idea she had picked up the wrong Raymond Steele. The car moved smoothly along the highway, gliding through early morning traffic as if on rails. Madison sat with her back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap, doing her best to maintain the image of composed professionalism. She could feel his presence beside her, not oppressive, not loud, just centered. Like gravity. The man she believed to be Raymond Steele hadn't said much since they left the airport. Once or twice he'd opened his eyes to glance out the tinted window, nodding slightly at something. A new billboard, perhaps, or the distant skyline. He didn't seem irritated by her silence, nor did he seem eager to fill it. Have you ever been to this city before? She ventured, watching his reflection in the window. He turned toward her, eyes a steely gray that caught the morning light. A few times, mostly for work. I don't usually stay long. Madison nodded. Well, the Marriott's in a nice area. Lots of restaurants and galleries around there, if you have time to explore. His lips curved faintly. You're really leaning into the concierge role. She flushed. Sorry. First day nerves. No need to apologize. It's charming. The word caught her off guard. Charming? She swallowed, unsure how to respond. She turned to look out her own window, trying to settle her nerves. It was a compliment, probably meant to be polite. That was all. Do you live here? He asked after a beat. Yeah. Born and raised, actually. Moved around a little after college, but this city keeps dragging me back. Like an ex who won't let go. That earned a real laugh from him, short, low, and unexpectedly warm. Madison smiled despite herself. So, you're a writer, he said, catching her off guard again. She blinked. How did you? You've got that distracted look, he said, tapping his temple with 2 fingers. Like your brain's always somewhere else. Writers have that. Madison opened her mouth, then closed it. Guilty, she said finally. Trying to make it work. Freelance gigs, journals, the occasional unpaid article. And this, he motioned between them. Just a side hustle? Not even that. A favor, really. My cousin, or relative, I guess she was sick, asked me to step in just for today. He nodded slowly, absorbing the information, then gave her a sidelong glance. So I'm your first client? Officially, yes. Sorry in advance if I screw anything up. He leaned back again, arms relaxed across his lap. If this is you screwing up, I'm not sure what your best looks like. Madison felt the flush rising to her cheeks again, but before she could say anything, Anil announced, Arriving in 5 minutes, miss. Thank you, she said, grateful for the interruption. The car turned onto a wide, tree-lined boulevard, modern towers rising on either side like steel monuments. The hotel came into view, a sleek glass structure with gold trim, its name etched in elegant lettering across a marble facade. The car slowed to a smooth stop under the portico. Anil stepped out, opening the passenger door. Madison followed quickly, grabbing the suitcase from the trunk and meeting Mr. Steele as he stepped onto the curb. "This way, sir," she said, guiding him toward the sliding doors. The marble-floored lobby gleamed under soft lighting, minimalist yet opulent. At the front desk, a woman in a navy uniform greeted them with a polished smile. "Welcome to the Marriott Executive Tower. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Madison said, stepping forward with confidence. "For Mr. Raymond Steele." "It should have been arranged by," she hesitated. "By his assistant." The woman tapped rapidly on her keyboard, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, I don't see a reservation under that name." Madison frowned. "Could you double-check?" The receptionist did. Twice. Still nothing. Madison's heart began to pound. She turned to the man beside her. I don't understand." Andrea said it was confirmed. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he seemed entertained. "No matter," he said smoothly, pulling out a sleek black credit card and placing it on the counter. "I'll book directly. A suite, please. Quiet floor. Corner view, if possible." The receptionist took the card and began typing. Madison stood frozen beside him, her mind racing. Something was off. Why wasn't he upset? Why hadn't he called his assistant to complain? Why wasn't he confused about the missing reservation? She turned to him, brow furrowed. "You're taking this really well." He smiled slightly. "You're trying so hard to hold this together. I didn't want to make it worse." Madison felt her stomach drop. "Wait, what do you mean? I'm not the Raymond Steele you were supposed to pick up." Silence. Madison stared at him, blinking slowly as the words settled in. "I what? I'm Raymond Steele," he said. "Just not that Raymond Steele." She stepped back half a pace, mouth open. "You let me pick you up? You knew." He shrugged, as if this kind of thing happened to him every Tuesday. "I saw the sign. You looked terrified. I thought it might be fun to see how it played out." "Fun," she squeaked. "I'm sorry. I should have said something. But I enjoyed our conversation. And honestly," he leaned slightly closer, "it's the first pickup I've had in years where someone talked to me like a human being." Madison looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly everything clicked. The mismatched details, the too smooth demeanor, the way he'd never actually confirmed anything beyond his name. "Oh my God," she whispered, eyes widening. "You're that Raymond Steele." He raised a brow. "Which one?" "The CEO. The one with the AI company. The one who doesn't do interviews." A corner of his mouth lifted. "Guilty." Madison's knees felt like gelatin. "I picked up the wrong multimillionaire." "Technically, you picked up the right one for you," he said, and offered her a small, wry smile. "Don't worry. I won't get your cousin fired. In fact, I'd like to buy you a coffee." She blinked at him again, stunned. "Coffee? You know, as thanks for the best airport pickup I've ever had." The lobby air smelled faintly of lavender and polished stone. Luxury filtered through a hotel's quiet heartbeat. Madison stood there, halfway between indignation and disbelief, as Raymond casually tucked his black credit card back into a minimalist leather wallet, as if booking himself into a five-star hotel after impersonating the wrong Raymond Steele was a perfectly normal way to spend a Wednesday morning. He turned toward her after the receptionist handed over his keycard in a tasteful envelope. "Would you care to join me for a coffee in the lounge?" Madison blinked. "You want to get coffee? With me?" He gave a half-smile. "I know you weren't expecting to chauffeur the wrong billionaire this morning, but now that you have, seems only fair we sit down like civilized adults." Madison hesitated. This was surreal. Her stomach still hadn't caught up to the events of the last 20 minutes. She had just committed the kind of mistake that could end someone's career. Technically, her cousin's career. And yet here was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar AI tech company inviting her for coffee like they were college friends catching up. He took her pause for what it was and softened his tone. No obligations. But I owe you a conversation at the very least. Madison glanced at the check-in desk. No sign of outrage, no panic from hotel staff. No swarm of assistants or men in suits asking where the real Mr. Steele was. And this man, this Raymond Steele, looked entirely unbothered. As if this morning's mishap had amused him more than anything else. "Okay," she said finally. "Coffee." He nodded once, pleased, and led the way. The lounge was carved into the east wing of the lobby, an open, sunlit space with low velvet chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the soft murmur of expensive espresso machines. The clientele was a mix of smartly dressed executives and elegant tourists, all pretending not to notice the man Madison walked in with. A waitress in tailored uniform appeared almost instantly. "Cappuccino for me," Raymond said. Then, glancing at Madison, "You? Just a flat white." "Thank you." They settled into a booth near the window. Madison sat with her hands in her lap, suddenly hyper-aware of the ink stain on her thumb and the threadbare hem of her black slacks. She hadn't dressed for this, hadn't prepared for this. "So," she said, leaning forward just a little, "how long did you know?" "That I was the wrong Steele?" he asked, crossing one leg over the other. "Almost immediately." Madison groaned and slumped back in her seat. "You could have said something. I considered it. But you looked so earnest. And terrified. It was oddly endearing." "You find my anxiety endearing?" He smiled. "Not your anxiety. Your effort. You clearly didn't know what you were doing, but you cared enough to try." She folded her arms. "Great. So I'm the adorable disaster who gave the wrong CEO a lift." "I didn't say disaster." "Implied," she muttered. Their drinks arrived. Raymond took a careful sip and then set his cup down. "Why'd you agree to it?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "Agree to what?" "This favor. The pickup. Your cousin." Madison wrapped her fingers around her mug, grateful for its warmth. "Because she begged. Because I needed the money. Because I've made a habit of saying yes to things I probably shouldn't." "That sounds like a writer," he said, almost to himself. She gave him a look. "You keep saying that. You're pretty sure of your read on people." "I spend a lot of time in meetings with people pretending to be more than they are. It makes you pay attention to the ones who don't." "Like me." "Exactly like you." Madison took a slow sip. The bitterness grounded her. Raymond looked out the window at the slow-moving traffic below. His voice softened. "I've had 20 years of people knowing who I am before I even open my mouth. And this morning, I got to be just some guy getting picked up at the airport." She watched him closely then, seeing past the designer suit and the polished charm. There was something in his expression, a kind of weariness. A quiet loneliness, maybe. "Besides," he added, glancing back at her, "I haven't had an interesting morning in a very long time." Madison looked down at her coffee. She was both flattered and unsettled by the compliment. "I'm not sure if that says more about me or about your life," she said. He chuckled. "Touché." A silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was considerate, like both of them were letting the moment breathe. After a while, Madison leaned back. "So what happens now?" Raymond raised a brow. "Now? Yeah. You going to call my cousin's boss and get her fired? Or are you secretly planning to send me a cease and desist letter for impersonating an airport agent?" His smile returned. "Tempting. But no. Actually, I'd like to fix this." She blinked. "Fix it?" "Yes. I have a few calls to make. But I'll make sure no one loses their job over this. You were trying to help. That deserves grace." Madison's chest tightened, surprised by the emotion that swelled at his words. "Thank you," she said quietly. He gave her a long look. Not sharp. Not assessing. Just curious. "And after that," he continued, "I was wondering, if you're free tomorrow, would you join me for lunch?" She stared. "Lunch? Not a pickup. Not a mistake. Just lunch. Two people with a strange story between them." Madison was quiet for a long moment, heart still thudding. Then she smiled. "Okay," she said. "But this time I get to pick the place." He grinned. "Deal." The next afternoon brought with it a slow, golden warmth, a rare moment of spring in a city that usually skipped from winter straight to summer. Madison arrived 5 minutes early at the little bistro she had chosen. La Rue, a tucked-away corner cafe in the arts district. Not pretentious, not crowded. Wooden tables scattered beneath latticed ivy, jazz music curling around the edges of the space like smoke. It was a place Madison often came to write, to think, to be invisible. But today, she was waiting for someone impossible to ignore. She wore her favorite navy dress, one she had bought on impulse 2 years ago and rarely had occasion to wear. Her hair was down, curled at the ends, and she had put on a pair of earrings her mother had given her. Just enough effort to say I care, not too much to say I'm trying. She fiddled with the strap of her bag and checked her phone again. 2:27 p.m. "He's not late," she muttered to herself. "You're just early." And then, like a scene directed by fate, he appeared. Raymond Steele walked toward her, no entourage, no sleek black car, no designer sunglasses. Just a crisp white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, tailored charcoal slacks, and a calm, steady presence. He looked like a man who belonged in boardrooms and bookshops at once. "I didn't know if you'd show," he said as he reached the table. "I didn't know if you meant it," she replied, trying to sound composed. His eyes twinkled. "I always mean it." They sat. The waitress came by, blinking once too long at Raymond before offering them menus. Madison saw it, the flicker of recognition, the hesitation, and watched as he diffused it with a kind, practiced smile. "I'll have the tomato bisque and iced tea," Madison said. "Same for me," he added, then looked at Madison as the waitress walked off. "You really picked the perfect place. It's quiet. Thought you might appreciate not being photographed mid-bite." He laughed. "Very thoughtful. And yes, I appreciate it." Their food arrived quickly, and conversation began in slow, cautious ripples. They spoke about books first. Raymond mentioned he was rereading The Little Prince, which surprised her. "You don't strike me as a fable kind of guy," she said. "I'm not. That's why I needed it." She told him about her failed attempt to get an agent for her novel, how the story she'd spent 2 years writing was gathering digital dust in her inbox. "I think I've rewritten the opening chapter 17 times, she said. "And every time I do, it gets worse." "You're too close to it," he said. "You can't see what's brilliant anymore. You haven't read it." "I've read you." She glanced at him. He was watching her carefully, not the way men do when they want to impress, but the way people look when they're actually paying attention. She didn't know how to feel about that. They talked through the meal, slow at first, then building like a river that forgot it was ever frozen. Raymond told her about his start in software, how he built his first program at 17 and sold it before college. How money came fast, but loneliness came faster. He didn't say it with drama or bitterness, just honesty. "I had friends," he said, "but most of them worked for me eventually. That changes things." "Why not marry someone?" Madison asked, instantly regretting it. "Sorry. That was blunt." He didn't flinch. "I was married," he said. "Once." The words hung between them. "Oh," she said, lowering her gaze. "It didn't last," he said. "We wanted different lives." She didn't sign up for headlines and stockholder meetings. "And you did." "I didn't think about what I was signing up for. I just built things. I thought that would be enough." Madison nodded slowly. "Sometimes we think success will insulate us, but it just makes the silence echo louder." He looked at her with something close to awe. Exactly. There it was again, that pull, that strange and quiet gravity. After lunch, they walked through the adjoining art district. Murals bloomed on brick walls, and street musicians filled the air with cello and saxophone. They stopped in front of a bookstore. Raymond tilted his head. "You come here often?" "It's my church," she said. "Then let's go in." Inside, the dusty scent of old pages embraced them. Madison wandered ahead, running her fingers along spines, pausing at a poetry section. Raymond didn't hover. He explored on his own, quietly respectful. She found him later by the philosophy aisle, holding a copy of letters to a young poet. "This seems like something you'd already own," she said. "I do," he replied. "But I've never had someone to give it to." She held his gaze, unsure what to say. He handed it to her without ceremony. "For your next chapter." Madison took the book slowly, her fingers brushing his. The warmth that passed between them wasn't instant heat. It was something slower, truer, like the first note of a song you didn't know you'd been waiting to hear. They exited the bookstore, just as the sun began to drop behind the buildings. The shadows stretched long. Time had moved faster than either of them had realized. Raymond turned toward her. "Thank you for today." "You're welcome. It's not every day I get to lunch with a CEO I accidentally abducted." He smiled at that. "Can I see you again?" he asked carefully. Madison hesitated, less from doubt and more from disbelief. "You don't think this is weird?" "I think this is the least weird thing in my life right now." She smiled. "Then yes, you can." They stood on the curb for a moment too long, neither making the move to say goodbye. "I'll message you," he said finally. "I'll read it." He gave a short laugh at that, then turned, hands in pockets, and walked down the sidewalk, disappearing slowly into the evening crowd. Madison stood still, her fingers curled around the book he gave her. It was the first time in a long while that her heart didn't feel like it was waiting for something. It felt like it had just been handed the beginning of something instead. The next morning began in a much less poetic fashion. Madison had just taken her first sip of lukewarm instant coffee when her phone rang, an aggressive, insistent buzz that made her flinch. She glanced at the caller ID and winced. "Andrea." "Here it comes." She answered hesitantly. "Hey, Andrea. You picked up the wrong man." The voice on the other end was sharp, breathless, and teetering between fury and full-blown panic. Madison froze. "How did you know?" "Because the real Raymond Steele, my company's actual VIP client, arrived 3 hours late last night after a delay in Tokyo. And there was no one there to greet him. Because you had already picked up a man who just happened to have the same name." "Oh my God!" Madison gripped the edge of her desk. "I didn't know there were 2 Raymond Steeles." He looked the part. Everyone looks the part in an airport, Madison. You should have confirmed his itinerary. You didn't even check his ID, did you?" He said yes, and I just assumed." "You assumed?" Andrea was livid now. "Do you realize what you've done? My supervisor called me at midnight. He thinks I messed up the schedule. The real Mr. Steele threatened to file a complaint. I'm hanging by a thread right now." Madison closed her eyes, guilt washing over her in waves. "I'm so sorry, Andrea. I swear I'll fix it. I'll call whoever I need to. I'll explain everything. Just give me the contact." No, you've done enough." Andrea's voice cracked slightly, fury softening into despair. "I could lose this job, Madison." Madison opened her mouth to speak, but Andrea had already hung up. She sat there, staring at the silent phone, shame heavy on her chest. The day before had felt like a beautiful mistake, a fairy tale glitch. But this morning, this was reality slamming the door back open. Without hesitating, Madison pulled up her messages and typed. "Madison, hey. Something happened. I need to talk to you. Urgently." She hit send. 3 minutes later, her phone pinged. "Raymond, I figured this might happen. I'll handle it." "Madison, Raymond, she could lose her job. She's terrified." "Raymond, I understand. Let me make some calls." At exactly 10:07 a.m., Madison's phone buzzed again. "Raymond, it's done. Nobody's getting fired." The client was given a VIP upgrade and a company apology. Andrea's supervisor has accepted it as a scheduling miscommunication. Madison stared at the screen in disbelief. "Madison, how did you even?" "Raymond, I know a few people. Turns out, the other Mr. Steele used to pitch me business ideas 10 years ago." The irony wasn't lost on him. "Madison, I don't know what to say." "Raymond, say you'll come by the office tomorrow. I have a proposal for you." Her eyes narrowed. "Proposal?" She typed back, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Madison, what kind of proposal? Raymond, one that involves you, your writing, and possibly a book with my name on the spine. Madison blinked. Her heart did a slow, stunned somersault. Raymond's office was located in a building that barely announced itself, modern, mirrored glass, and a security system that scanned your eyes instead of your badge. Madison felt underdressed in her blazer and boots, but the receptionist greeted her warmly, clearly briefed. Mr. Steele is expecting you. Top floor. The elevator glided upward, too fast and too quiet. Her stomach fluttered with every floor passed. By the time the doors opened, she half expected to step into a Bond villain's lair. Instead, it was a minimalist studio. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows spilling sunlight across a long oak table. Books lined the walls. No mahogany desk, no leather throne. Just Raymond, in dark jeans and a navy sweater, standing by a coffee pot. He smiled when he saw her. Thought I'd give you a break from hotel cappuccinos. She walked in slowly. So, you're not firing me from the role of fake airport concierge. He chuckled. On the contrary, I might be offering you a new job entirely. She tilted her head. What kind of job? He handed her a cup of coffee and motioned for her to sit. I've had a dozen ghostwriters approach me over the years. PR firms, biographers, journalists. All of them wanted a narrative with headlines and quarterly earnings. None of them wanted me. She sipped. And I do. You didn't even know who I was when we met. You asked about my life, not my IPO. That's rare. Madison leaned back. So, you want me to write your memoir? Something like that. Not a tell-all. Not a business how-to. Just the story. My story. The one I've never told anyone. I want your voice telling it. She blinked. But I'm not published. I don't have experience with this kind of. I've read your blog. Your articles. Your essays. You understand people, Madison. You find the heartbeat beneath the noise. Her mouth parted, but she didn't speak. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Not a teacher, not an editor, not even a friend. I'll cover your time, he continued. You'll work your own hours. You'll have access to every note, every file, every late-night regret I've kept locked away. All I want is honesty. Madison set her coffee down, heart hammering. This is huge. This is overdue. She looked out the window behind him. At the skyline, at the people below who had no idea this strange series of events was unfolding above their heads. And then she looked back at Raymond. Still waiting. Still watching her with quiet expectation. Okay, she said. I'll do it. He smiled. Something unspoken passed between them then. Not quite romantic, not yet, but undeniably intimate. A pact. A shift. One that neither of them realized would change both of their lives forever. The next few days moved differently. There was a rhythm now, a low current humming beneath Madison's life, as if someone had turned the volume up on her instincts and her pulse at the same time. She wasn't just floating from one coffee shift to the next, from writing gigs no one read to a dream she was slowly losing faith in. She had a purpose now, one wrapped in tailored suits, ghost-written honesty, and the improbable idea that she, Madison Richardson, would be writing the life story of Raymond Steele. And somehow the absurdity of it made it feel real. Raymond had given her a key card. Your own access, he said simply. Come and go as you like. The room he gave her wasn't an office. It was more like a vault of memories. A glass-walled studio on the 28th floor with views of the river and a library filled with curated chaos. Boxes of journals, digital archives, encrypted hard drives labeled Seattle 2009 and Lisbon prototype. The first time she stepped inside, she stood in the middle of it all, blinking. It was like walking into someone's mind while they were still alive. Scattered, brilliant, unfinished. And yet, everything was in place. There was a quiet order beneath the entropy. Just like him, he'd given her access to everything. Every deal. Every betrayal. Every startup that failed and every moment he had considered quitting before success made quitting impossible. She started slow. Day 1, she read his earliest interviews. Not press pieces, but handwritten answers to old startup incubators, his 23-year-old voice still full of idealism, scribbling things like, "I want to build a future no one's scared of." Day 2, voice memos from flights. Tired recordings in hotel rooms at 3 a.m. He spoke to himself like he was documenting an alien landing. "I walked into a boardroom of 20 people, and none of them could look me in the eye. That's not power. It's fear wearing a suit." Day 3, his wedding video. Unmarked, dusty. She didn't watch all of it. Just long enough to see his younger self smiling in the way he never did now. By the end of the week, Madison's notes filled 2 legal pads, and the walls of her tiny workspace were plastered with timelines, themes, questions. But she was missing something. The heart. The real voice behind the polish. On Friday, Madison knocked on Raymond's office door just after 4 p.m. He looked up from his desk, a stylus in one hand, his tablet screen full of architectural diagrams. "Got a minute?" she asked. "For you?" "Always." She stepped in, holding one of the hard drives. Tokyo 2016. "I've read a lot. More than I probably should have. But there are gaps." He raised a brow. "What kind?" "The kind you don't put in files." He set the stylus down and leaned back in his chair. "Ask." Madison sat across from him, her voice steady. "What was the moment that broke you?" Raymond looked at her. Not with surprise, but with respect. "You don't dance around, do you?" "No. And I can't write this unless I know." He didn't speak for a while. Then, slowly, he reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a small velvet box. Not flashy. Old. He opened it. Inside was a silver ring, simple, worn, and unmistakably feminine. "My ex-wife left it on my desk the day she walked out," he said, voice low. "No note. No fight. Just this." Madison didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. She'd watched me become something else. I thought I was building a legacy. But she saw a machine. He closed the box. That was the moment. Not when the company nearly collapsed in 2017. Not when I lost $3 million on a failed app. It was this ring. Because it proved I'd succeeded at the cost of the one person who never cared about my net worth. "And you kept it." "Because I need the reminder." They were quiet for a beat. Then Madison asked softly, "Do you ever wish you'd done it differently?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes. Every day." Later that evening, Raymond invited her to join him at a fundraising gala. "You don't have to come as my date," he said with a smirk. "Come as my shield." Madison had nothing to wear, but he'd already thought of that. A black dress waited for her at her apartment that evening, delivered in a discreet box with a card. "For the woman writing my truths. Don't be late." At the event, Raymond was a different man. Confident. Polished. A force. Madison stayed by his side, watching him glide through conversations like a chess master. Calm. Always 3 moves ahead. And yet, every time he looked at her, it was like he was pausing the game just for her benefit. A woman from the concierge company approached at one point, Andrea's supervisor. "Mr. Steele, thank you again for your generosity. We sincerely apologize for the mix-up." Raymond smiled. "Mistakes happen, but sometimes they lead to better outcomes." His hand rested briefly at Madison's back. The woman glanced between them and smiled politely, confused but curious. Later, Madison whispered, "You didn't have to come." "I did," he said, "because you kept your word. And because Andrea deserves to keep her job. You fixed it. I told you I would." She looked up at him. "You always this calm when people mess up your plans?" "Only when I like the new ones better." After the gala, they walked. No driver. Just the city and the sound of their footsteps on old pavement. Raymond loosened his tie. Madison slipped off her heels and carried them by the straps. "You ever wonder," he said, "what would have happened if you hadn't held up that sign?" "All the time," she replied. "I think about it in spirals. And I think I wouldn't have liked the version of me who stayed home that day." He nodded quietly. They stopped at a park bench, under a streetlight washed in amber. He sat. She sat beside him. "I know this started with a mistake," he said, "but it doesn't feel like one anymore." She looked at him, vulnerable now. Raymond, she said carefully, is this still about the memoir? He turned to her fully. No, this is about you. The space between them was small. Close enough to feel the electricity, but not yet enough to risk it. Not yet. He reached for her hand. She let him. They sat like that, under city light and silence, two people finding each other through the wreckage of their perfectly controlled lives. And for the first time in years, Raymond Steele didn't feel like a man writing a legacy. He felt like someone starting over. Madison woke early the next morning, not to an alarm, but to an idea. That had been happening a lot lately. Since taking on Raymond's story, her dreams were fuller, her thoughts sharper, her pen less hesitant. She would wake up with fragments of dialogue, flashes of his past reassembled in her own voice, and rush to scribble them into her leather-bound notebook before they vanished. She hadn't even touched her old novel in weeks, and strangely, that didn't fill her with guilt. It filled her with relief. Because somehow, in telling someone else's truth, she was beginning to find her own. She arrived at Raymond's studio by 9:15, clutching a cup of her favorite chai from the corner cart. One for her, one for him. He always insisted on bringing his own coffee, but lately, he'd started asking about hers. He was already at the window when she arrived, arms folded, deep in thought. His phone was on silent. That alone was unusual. Rough night? She asked, setting down the chai. He turned, eyes tired but clear. No, just a long one. She didn't press. He would talk when he wanted to. That was part of their unspoken agreement now. No prying, only invitations. Instead, she pulled up the laptop she'd been using for the memoir. A blank document stared back at her. It was time to write the next section. The collapse of his first company and the betrayal that nearly buried him. Raymond watched her from the other side of the table. You always frown like that when you're about to write something personal? He asked. I frown because I'm afraid of messing it up. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. You haven't yet. She glanced up. You've read the drafts? All of them. And I see myself in your words. Sometimes more than I'd like to. That's the job. He nodded. Still, it's the first time I've felt seen without being exposed. That made her still. She swallowed carefully. Thank you, he added, softer now. Their eyes locked. She had no witty reply, no writer's instinct to fill the space. She just nodded and started typing. Their days became a rhythm. Mornings filled with interviews and scattered memories, afternoons of writing and revision, evenings when they wandered city streets like two people clinging to borrowed time. Each moment added layers. She learned the way his voice changed when he talked about his mother. How he still, even now, paused before mentioning his father, as if afraid to speak a ghost into the room. He learned the way she clutched her pen when her thoughts ran faster than her words. How she carried self-doubt like armor, well-worn and too heavy. They didn't call it anything. Not yet. One evening, while reviewing a chapter draft, Madison asked, Do you ever regret giving it all up? Giving what up? He asked. The chance at a quieter life. He didn't answer immediately. He glanced out the window, watching the light fade. I used to think quiet meant small. That if I wasn't building something world-changing, I was wasting time. And now I think the biggest thing I've ever built might be this story. Madison turned to him. You mean the company's story? He looked at her with quiet intensity. No, ours. The word slipped into the room like a secret. Ours. It landed between them like a stone in still water, small, but it rippled far. Madison looked down at her keyboard. She had no words for that. Not yet. The next morning, she arrived at the studio to find a neatly bound stack of pages on her desk. Her manuscript. Not the memoir. Her novel. The one she hadn't touched in months. The one she hadn't even told him she'd printed out. She looked up sharply. He was leaning against the doorway, hands in pockets, that knowing look on his face again. You read it? I found it on the shared drive. Her heart leapt into her throat. You hacked into my folder? You left it open. I just opened it wider. Raymond, I stayed up all night. She blinked. You what? I read the whole thing. Twice. She stared. It's not finished. It doesn't have to be. It's brilliant. She looked down at the pages, shaking her head. No, it's clumsy and the middle sags in. You don't see it yet. But you will. He stepped forward, serious now. I want to publish it. Her head shot up. You what? I have contacts. Imprints. Editors who owe me favors. Let me help you get it into the world. But, no strings. I just believe in it. In you. She sat down hard, like someone who'd been struck by lightning, but in the most beautiful way. I don't know what to say, she whispered. He smiled. You'll figure it out. You're the writer. That night, they found themselves walking again, this time without purpose. The city seemed to slow around them, as if giving them room. They ended up back at the rooftop garden of his building, the one with the jasmine trellises and the glowing skyline. The air was warm. The city below glittered like it had been dipped in stardust. They stood by the railing, close. Very close. Madison turned to him, heart thudding. Why are you doing this? He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. Because I don't want you to be just a chapter in my story. He reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face. And maybe, he said, I want to be more than a name in yours. The silence was electric. They stood there, suspended between confession and hesitation. Then slowly, gently, he leaned in. She didn't stop him. Their lips brushed, barely a kiss, more like a promise. And in that single fragile second, the world fell away. Not as a grand cinematic sweep, but as two people finding, at last, that the stories they'd spent their lives trying to write might have been leading to each other all along. 3 weeks had passed since that kiss, and neither of them had spoken of it since. Not because it hadn't meant anything, on the contrary. It meant too much. It lingered in glances, in silences that stretched a little too long. In the subtle way they sat slightly closer than before but never touched again. They kept working. Every day, Madison wrote more of Raymond's memoir, threading his past into a narrative that felt less like a CEO's legacy and more like a human being unfolding, layer by complicated layer. She understood him now. Not just his story, but the rhythm of it. The spaces between his words, the pauses he didn't explain. And he learned the rhythm of her. He made it a point to ask where she was writing that day, whether she'd eaten lunch. He read her manuscript, her novel, her first love, more closely than she had, and when she faltered in confidence, he held the mirror up again. They were orbiting each other now. Closer than friends, quieter than lovers. Suspended in the in-between, terrified of falling and terrified of not. But something had shifted. And it was time. On a breezy Friday afternoon, a sleek envelope appeared on Madison's desk at the studio. Her name was handwritten in fine calligraphy. Inside was a card. Dinner. 8 p.m. rooftop. Dress comfortably. And bring your final chapter. R. She stared at it for a full minute before realizing her hands were trembling. That evening, she wore no makeup. Just her favorite soft cardigan, jeans, and the necklace her grandmother had once given her. A tiny pen-shaped charm made of silver. A quiet reminder of who she was before all of this. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a scene lit by intention. Fairy lights wound through jasmine vines. A small table waited, already set. A soft instrumental playlist hummed low in the background. Piano, cello, just enough to fill the space. Raymond stood by the railing, in a charcoal pullover and black slacks. No watch, no phone, no armor. He turned when he heard her. And smiled. You came. You invited me. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. The warmth between them filled the space just fine. Dinner was served, simple food comforting. Pasta, fresh bread, grilled vegetables. He poured wine, then held up his glass. To the end of your first draft, he said. She grinned. To the beginning of yours. They clinked glasses, and for a moment, Madison let herself imagine a future where these clinks were ordinary. After dinner, he gestured to the small leather-bound folder she had brought. You brought it. I did. Read it to me? She hesitated, then opened the folder and began. Some stories start with chaos. some with silence. But the ones that change your life often begin with a mistake that doesn't look like one. Not yet. This story began when I picked up the wrong Raymond Steele at the airport. He smiled. She kept reading, her voice soft but sure, as she detailed not just what happened, but how it transformed her. How meeting him made her brave enough to claim her voice. How the story they wrote together became more than pages. It became a mirror. When she reached the final lines, she hesitated. He waited. I don't know how this story ends, but I do know what it gave me. A version of myself I hadn't yet met. And a man who reminded me that sometimes the wrong turn leads exactly where you're meant to be. She closed the folder. That's it. Raymond was quiet. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, navy blue velvet. Madison blinked. What is that? He opened it. Inside was not a ring, but a pen. A fountain pen. Black lacquered, gold trim. Elegant, classic. He looked at her. You gave me my story. I thought it was only fair to give you the tool to write your next one. She took it slowly, heart thudding. Raymond, I'm not proposing. Not tonight. But I am saying I don't want this to end at a final chapter. Tears pressed quietly at the back of her eyes. And what would the next chapter be? She asked. He stepped forward, close now. Whatever we want it to be. And then he kissed her. Not like the first time, tentative, cautious, but fully, completely. Like a punctuation mark. Like something meant. 6 months later, the memoir was published. Through Glass, The Unwritten Life of Raymond Steele became a bestseller not because it was about a billionaire, but because it was honest. Sharp. Human. The byline included her name. With Madison Richardson. Bookstores invited her for signings. Raymond sat in the back row, proud and quiet, never once stealing the spotlight. Her own novel? Picked up by a mid-sized literary publisher. Release date, the following spring. And Raymond? He still built things. But now he built quietly, with her, beside her. They traveled, they wrote, they wandered. And sometimes they still got airport pickups wrong. On purpose. Because sometimes the best stories begin exactly where they're not supposed to. And Madison never stopped writing. Because love, like literature, is not about perfection. It's about connection.